There's a specific kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels tight, controlled, measured. You say it's fine when it isn't. You tell yourself you're overreacting. You swallow the comment that bothered you, the request that felt unfair, the tone that stung. You choose calm over confrontation, harmony over honesty. And for a while it works, until it doesn't. Then one small thing happens, a forgotten chore, a dismissive reply, a minor inconvenience, and suddenly the reaction is disproportionate, sharp, emotional, explosive. The other person is confused. You're confused. How did something so small trigger something so big? This is the psychology of silent resentment, the slow accumulation of unexpressed emotion that eventually demands release. Silent resentment doesn't begin with anger. It begins with inhibition. Many of us learned early on that expressing negative emotions was unsafe or unacceptable. Maybe anger was punished. Maybe sadness was ignored. Maybe conflict between caregivers felt overwhelming and you decided, consciously or unconsciously, that you would be the calm one, the easy one, the one who doesn't add to the chaos. As children, we are deeply sensitive to relational stability. If expressing frustration led to withdrawal, criticism, or escalation, the nervous system adapted. It learned that suppressing emotion preserved connection. You might have heard phrases like, "Don't be dramatic," "Stop being so sensitive," or "Be grateful." Over time, these messages shape an internal rule. My feelings are inconvenient. Suppression becomes a strategy. And like most survival strategies, it works. At first, psychologically, emotional suppression is a form of avoidance. It's not that the emotion disappears, it simply goes underground. Neuroscience shows that when we inhibit emotional expression, the physiological response doesn't vanish. The heart rate still shifts, stress hormones still release, the body still registers the experience. You may appear calm on the surface, but internally, tension accumulates. Resentment grows quietly in these spaces. In adulthood, this often manifests as chronic fineness. You don't complain, you accommodate, you adjust. When a partner forgets something important, you tell yourself it's not worth arguing about. When a colleague takes credit for your work, you brush it off. When a friend repeatedly cancels plans, you rationalize their behavior. But every time you override your emotional response, you send yourself a subtle message. My experience doesn't matter. Resentment is not immediate rage. It's the emotional residue of repeated self-abandonment. Over time, the mind begins to keep score. You may not consciously track it, but your nervous system does. Each unspoken frustration becomes a data point, a mental file, a quiet tally. This is the third time. They never ask about me. I always have to adjust. Because the resentment isn't expressed, it can't be resolved. It doesn't get processed through conversation or repair. Instead, it turns inward. You might start feeling distant from the person, less affectionate, less enthusiastic. Small irritations become amplified because they're landing on top of a stack of unresolved emotions. The explosion, when it comes, isn't about the present moment. It's about everything that came before it. One of the most misunderstood aspects of silent resentment is that it often coexists with a strong desire to be good. Good partner, good friend, good employee. You may pride yourself on being low maintenance, independent, mature. But beneath that identity can be a fear. If I express dissatisfaction, I will be seen as difficult. This fear is often rooted in attachment patterns. If early relationships felt unstable or conditional, you may have learned that love requires emotional restraint. Anxious attachment may lead to over-accommodation to avoid abandonment. Avoidant attachment may lead to emotional shutdown to avoid vulnerability. In both cases, feelings are suppressed to manage relational anxiety. There is also a cultural component. Many societies reward composure over authenticity. Particularly for certain genders, anger may be labeled aggressive or ungrateful. So resentment becomes internalized. You smile while feeling hurt. You nod while feeling dismissed. But suppressed emotion doesn't dissolve. It transforms. It can show up as passive-aggressive comments, sarcasm, withdrawing affection. Emotional numbness, chronic irritability. You may not even connect your mood to the underlying resentment because you've become disconnected from your own anger. Anger, at its core, is protective. It signals boundary violation. It says, something feels unfair. But when we're uncomfortable with anger, we disconnect from that signal. We bypass it with rationalization. It's not a big deal. They didn't mean it, I'm just tired. Yet the body remembers. You might notice tightness in your jaw, headaches, a heavy feeling in your chest, or sudden spikes of emotion that feel out of proportion. These are often signs that your system has been holding more than it can metabolize. The eventual explosion is not a character flaw, it's a pressure release. Imagine shaking a soda can repeatedly while keeping the lid sealed. Each shake represents an unexpressed frustration. The can appears intact, but internally, pressure builds. When the lid finally opens, even slightly, the reaction is intense. Not because of that final shake, but because of the accumulated force. This is why people often say during arguments, "This isn't just about today." They're right. It rarely is. Silent resentment also erodes intimacy. When you don't express your needs, the other person doesn't get the opportunity to respond differently. They may genuinely believe everything is fine. Meanwhile, you feel unseen, unappreciated, or taken for granted. The distance grows, but no one names it. There's a painful irony here. In trying to preserve peace, you often create instability. So why is it so hard to speak up earlier? Because expressing dissatisfaction requires vulnerability. It means risking disapproval. It means tolerating the discomfort of someone else's reaction. For those who grew up equating conflict with rejection or chaos, this feels threatening. The nervous system may interpret a simple disagreement as danger. Healing begins with reframing anger as information rather than aggression. Anger doesn't make you unkind. It makes you aware. The goal is not to eliminate anger, but to express it in regulated, constructive ways. That starts with emotional literacy. Instead of jumping from fine to explosion, practice identifying micro-irritations. I felt dismissed when that happened. I was disappointed. That felt unfair. Naming emotions reduces their intensity and increases clarity. It also requires separating discomfort from catastrophe. If someone is briefly upset because you voiced a boundary, that does not mean the relationship is collapsing. Learning to sit with temporary tension without rushing to repair it immediately is a crucial skill. Another key shift is recognizing that resentment often signals an unmet need. Perhaps you need appreciation, reciprocity, rest, acknowledgement. When you identify the need beneath the anger, communication becomes less accusatory and more specific. Instead of "you never help," it becomes "I feel overwhelmed and I need more support." Instead of silent withdrawal, it becomes "when plans change last minute, I feel unimportant." This doesn't guarantee the other person will respond perfectly, but it gives the relationship a chance to evolve instead of implode. There is also deep self-work involved. If you've built an identity around being the calm, self-sufficient one, expressing frustration can feel like betraying who you are. But growth doesn't erase your strengths. It integrates them. You can be compassionate and assertive, understanding and boundaried. Self-compassion is essential here. Silent resentment developed for a reason. It may have protected you in environments where speaking up wasn't safe. Acknowledging that history reduces shame. You weren't weak for staying quiet. You were adaptive. Now, as an adult, you have more capacity, more language, more choice. Practice small acts of emotional honesty. Correct a minor misunderstanding. Express a mild preference. Notice the anxiety that arises, and stay present with it. Each time you survive a moment of honest communication, your nervous system updates its expectations. Conflict no longer equals catastrophe. You may also need to release the fantasy that others should just know how you feel. Unspoken expectations are fertile ground for resentment. Clarity is not selfish. It's respectful. Over time, something shifts. Instead of carrying silent scores, you address issues closer to their origin. The emotional pressure decreases. Explosions become less frequent because there's less buildup. Relationships feel lighter, more transparent. Most importantly, you stop abandoning yourself to maintain temporary peace. Silent resentment thrives in silence, but it heals in expression, not dramatic outbursts, but steady, regulated truth-telling. You are allowed to feel disappointed. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to say, calmly and clearly, that didn't sit right with me. The goal is not to become confrontational. It's to become congruent, aligned between what you feel and what you express. If you recognize this pattern in yourself, take it as a sign of awareness, not failure. Your explosions were signals. Your resentment was information. Beneath it all is a part of you that wants to be acknowledged by others and by yourself. You don't have to wait until you're at your breaking point to speak. You don't have to choose between silence and chaos. There is a middle space, a space where feelings are noticed early, named gently, a space where tension is addressed before it hardens into bitterness, a space where your voice exists not as a last resort, but as a steady presence. And in that space, relationships don't shatter under pressure, they breathe.